Alright, this week's a single small update. Although next month has actual blank days, so I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do there. For now, we'll deal with the one thing that arrived this week, which was Insomniacs After School. Which I'm not sure what it's about. This plastic is. There we go. But it sounds interesting. What is this that show? Oh well, let's see. We've got Region A, Japanese with English subtitles. These sleepless students. I don't know. Having trouble reading it. It's unfortunate because I guess it's. I'm not sure what to say about it, but it is nice that it exists. But alas, it's only the one thing, so here's this week's Physical Anime Collection update.
Alright, well, I guess the first thing to talk about is, at least one of you pointed out in my Discord, but other people have talked about, I guess it's highly notable that Akira Toriyama, creator of the famous, Dragon Ball series, has unfortunately passed away. And this isn't actually my first update after he passed away, because when I briefly Googled it to see if it was real, it sounded like he actually passed away on March 1st, but I think a lot of the world did not find out until a week later, which, is fine, because it kind of means that hopefully the people closer to him in life got a chance to, come to terms with it, and then for us, the rest of the world, we just, can be a little sad that we lost another. Unfortunately, as we get older, more and more people will pass away, and he isn't the only important person that passed away at all, but for a lot of us anime watchers, of course, he was a big one. Dragon Ball Z, it's, you can make a lot of fun of it, but it's a cultural staple. It's something that, a lot of people who maybe don't know if they watch anime or not, they said, oh, but yeah, I still watched Dragon Ball Z when I was a kid or something like that. And I think it's good that he kind of left a good cultural mark, If there's an afterlife and he's there, so hopefully he can say, yeah, look at all these people, they appreciate what I did. And, let's appreciate a little bit what he did. I was thinking of pulling out the Dragon Ball DVDs and Blu-rays I have, but Jesus, they're all over the place. And I'm already pretty exhausted these days. But, let's reminisce a little bit, Clearly people were a fan of him. Dragon Ball GT is kind of a really good example of this because, for all intents and purposes, I think that one was not done by Akira Toriyama, but it was done by people that were like, Dragon Ball Z and its power level stuff was cool and stuff, but a lot of his works tended more on the whimsical side, and Dragon Ball GT was made by fans who was like, let's try and reintroduce that whimsical side. And for all of its faults, I think Akira Toriyama recognized it as the labor of love that it was, fan-made though it was. And that's why in Dragon Ball Super, it had this really fun balance of the whimsy and the, power leveling stuff that it had. Dragon Ball Super was really nice, and I think there's more he probably did, but, I feel like Dragon Ball as a series evolved back into something that you could just kind of smile about and be like, okay, that's a little cheesy, but that's a very happy cheesy. And cheesy might not be the right word, but it was still, it had moments that were just very nice and heartwarming. It's like, great. And Dragon Ball is not the only work he did. Probably I should have done more research, because I bet he's done other anime, but nothing immediately jumps to mind. I think more of like his influence, especially in character design for video games. Chrono Trigger's a big one. That one's also a cultural icon, although, it's a little more subdued, but if you ever get the chance to play it, I can recommend it. It's got a simple enough but still engaging combat system that I don't think you'll be turned off by saying, oh, this is too much for me to think about. Instead, you're more like, oh, now those two characters can do an attack together? That's kind of cool. What other characters can I make do that? You know, that's, it's simple for what it is, but it's also, for a Super Nintendo game, really jam-packed full of stuff. And so, to some degree, I kind of appreciate that version. I would say the animated cutscenes in the PlayStation 1 version still had Akira Toriyama's design to them, I think. So, those were probably that there. And while I prefer, the Super Nintendo version, maybe the ideas behind, was it the DS version, which also introduces a secret final boss, which is a hint into Chrono Cross, which I've not played, but have some respect for. I'm trying to remember if he did the character design for Chrono Cross as well or not, but I'm not as familiar with that game, and so it's hard for me to say. But he also did the character design for, of course he did other anime. He did Dr. Slump. Everybody's been mentioning Dr. Slump, but of course, but I guess it just, Dr. Slump wasn't as big of a cultural influence here in the States, of course. Even though the android girl does show up in an episode of Dragon Ball for some reason. Again, the original Dragon Ball wasn't quite sure what it wanted to be, but it's like, oh, well, we're at least going to be whimsical about stuff as we go. But yeah, Akira Toriyama was also known for character designs for at least a lot of the Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior series. Dragon Warrior being the name of the first game on the NES, at least the US title of it, but the original series was called Dragon Quest, and I don't know, you take a look at some of the character designs for that, you're like, oh, yeah, that's Akira Toriyama for sure. I think of mostly of the characters from Dragon Quest 7 and 8. I've played 7. I haven't played 8, but you look at some of the characters from Dragon Quest 8 and you'll probably think, oh wait, that wasn't Dragon Ball. That's Dragon Quest. Something else. I'm pretty sure he's probably had his hand in a lot more character designs and stuff. Probably all across the Dragon Quest series, I would think, because I don't know, I just get this feeling that the classic Dragon Quest slime is probably his doing. And that one's been around, I think, since the first one. I could be mistaken. After all, I did start this video and get hiccups out of nowhere, so what am I to say? Yeah, it's unfortunate. Hopefully, though, there will be more cultural influences and people will remember Dragon Ball Z, all that stuff for what it was. I'm also hoping that we don't have somebody try to continue it, aka Dragon Ball GT stuff. Well, at least not an officially funded. People doing their own fanfiction stuff, sure, whatever. But I don't know. Sometimes it feels like this ghostwriting stuff, I worry a little bit. But then again, didn't somebody do that with Robert Jordan and the Wheel of Time stuff or something? And supposedly it was a pretty decent ending. If there were notes left behind and somebody could say, okay, well, they just needed like one more book and we can use their notes and say, all right, here's how it ended, then maybe that's okay. But at the same time, I don't think Dragon Ball Z was ever written with an ending in mind, because Dragon Ball was not written with Dragon Ball Z in mind. That show changed a lot. It began as a Journey to the West story. I'm thinking that's the right name for it. And, when you were an anime fan back when Dragon Ball Z was punching everybody in the gut and saying, oh, wow, anime is pretty cool, I remember when Cartoon Network had this little thing called Read or Die. And, there was characters like Goku's staff and Cloud and, whoa, what? But it's not Dragon Ball. It's because a lot of those things come from another story. A story that's older than Dragon Ball, and, it was inspired by that, but it didn't stay tied to that. It kind of found what it wanted to do and did something else weird. Fine enough. And I guess, to give some credit, some of the criticism you could level at Naruto, which is, thematically it just felt like it kept changing, and that's because the author wanted to try different things, but isn't that just what Akira Toriyama did? If there's anything wrong with what they did, it would probably be that they just didn't create a whimsical enough world from the get-go. In other words, they kind of lured people in with something that was a stronger story, possibly, than what it was aiming for. Whereas even if you say Dragon Ball began as a Journey to the West, maybe that's still okay, but it wasn't a Journey to the West with the explicit goals of that. It was just obviously inspired with the elements from that, but it was still very whimsical from the start. And if anything, the fact that its original goal was, okay, well, let's find the Dragon Balls and make a wish, well, that evolved throughout the series as it kept going and going, and they kept finding ways of making sure that was still kind of an important thought in all of its very different ways. Well, I hope his family's handling everything okay. I hope his coworkers are adjusting okay. I hope everything's as good as it can get with someone that important passing away. That said, let's talk about the things that I watched. Jujutsu Kaisen Season 1, Episodes 9 through 15. And, this reminds me of a lot of things. So, definitely for sure, I forgot how much I just actually really love the main character in Jujutsu Kaisen. He's just fun. And I think I've only ever heard him in the English dub, so there could be an element of the English dub to it. But I suspect that even his original Japanese voice was probably just fun. He's just a fun character. And some of the characters around him are pretty fun and refreshing. It's just nice. I can also remember why I wasn't terribly excited about moving forward to Season 2. It's because, like I said before, Season 1 keeps having these things where it's just like, okay, well, this stuff is kind of neat, but this does feel like it's starting to tiptoe away from the main story in a little bit. They're having fun with the characters, and that's fine, but I guess it means that I feel like if I start Season 2, I guess I just don't know if I will get that feeling of, oh yes, they're focusing on the main story, versus they hooked us with a main story that they don't expect to finish. And if I watch the entirety of Season 2 and feel like, okay, they just didn't make any progress, or apparent progress, that will disappoint me a little bit. I guess it was a good enough show where it's like, maybe it could be, but maybe I just didn't feel like finding out. But here with episode 15, it's entertaining enough stuff. Even with it, starting to drift a little off story a little bit, kind of. But yeah, let's start thinking of some of the other stuff. Villainous Level 99, episode 9. Let's see. I guess that was a surprising twist. And it did seem to start setting up something that seems like it could be a season or core finale. Something that I don't see taking 3 episodes to resolve, maybe 2 episodes. But this is the stinger at the end of the episode, basically. And I definitely want to see where it's going to go, because it's aiming in the direction of what I wanted to see interacted with most. So an entertaining enough episode. Good setup for the next episode in the end there. Gushing Over Magical Girls, episode 10. Did I read on Sentai that this was a 13 episode series? So it's kind of weird, because is it setting itself up to something? So I guess if there were 2 more big episodes, maybe I could see something like, if I were to think, this show could actually have a really great ending. A lot of the stuff I'm seeing here is a little weaker, maybe. No, not like bad, but definitely a little bit. I'm not sure if the hints of interesting it's given before are working, but it's shown some interesting, curious stuff. And I could see the next episode kind of being a sort of, things are maybe not stagnating isn't the right word. A kind of, here's a setup of things, but then at the end of the next episode, they give us a hint for, oh, this is why episode 12 is going to be spectacular, and then episode 12 could be spectacular, and then episode 13 could be a wrap-up episode. If they do something like that, this series could have a really great ending. But It might just mostly be okay, so we'll have to see. But I'm hopeful. Classroom of the Elite, Season 3, Episode 10. What happened in this episode? I guess more of that setup stuff. So I guess they are setting up for something big to happen at the end of the season. Was that the reveal we got at the end of the first season? I thought I watched the clip. And Season 2, I remember the ending to that one pretty well, because that was nice. With a follow-up episode, I would say. So, like, it is the penultimate episode that's just like, oh, yeah, this is really compelling stuff, actually. Season 3, maybe it's setting itself up for something like that, but we will have to see in a little bit. But decent enough stuff. Dr. Elise, the Royal Lady with the Lamp, Episode 9. What happened in the episode? Is that the content of what happened? I think so. And it was okay. I'm just trying to remember if it was only okay or if it was better. But I guess I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's setting itself up for a finale other than maybe what it was already doing up to this point, in which case, I guess it would make it similar to the first couple of episodes, which were off to a slightly slow start. Not like unbearably slow or badly slow, but just like, not the sort of show that would necessarily let you know what this show is going to be like based on the first episode alone. You needed a bit more to definitely gauge it. So, maybe a bit more of that. We'll have to see what it's going to do from here. Delicious in Dungeon, Episode 9. Let's see. A lot of stuff set up. How did the episode end? I'm trying to remember because it seemed like some pretty important stuff it was trying to do at the very end there. But I don't remember the very last thing. All I know is important stuff going on and appreciable stuff. But there's a part of me that thinks that it can't really end here because I think this is a 2-core series and we're getting close to the end of the first core. But it's been entertaining. I think some good thought-provoking stuff going on, actually. But that's been the series in general. It's always been, not like ridiculously clever, not, the super deepest storytelling, but just kind of enough to say, this show just keeps entertaining me with its interesting ideas, and it keeps exploring interesting ideas. So, let's see. My instant death ability, Episode 10. Okay, I think I remember this episode just jumping around a whole lot. Like, I'm not sure if it's not presenting the main material as it was, or the main material jumped around a lot, but maybe it was less noticeable in the manga form, maybe? I'm not sure. But I definitely remember feeling it, and stuff that's going on is okay and interesting, but I can see it maybe not being as effective feeling, but it does seem to be setting itself up for it may be a big thing. I'm not sure. There's a couple things going on, I guess. So I guess we'll have to see. Sasaki and Peeps, Episode 10. Okay, a resolution to the stuff that's been going on, which isn't the most exciting stuff, I would say, because a lot of it just feels like it's all corruption. So then why should we expect a happy ending for certain people? And, in the end, okay, yeah, it wrapped all that stuff up, but then, the stinger at the end of the episode is setting up for something that could be a season finale if it's working towards one, or core finale or something like that. A crescendo. But I guess we'll have to see, because it was a very substanceless stinger. Just enough to let you know that they're planning something, but not what that thing they're planning is. The Unwanted Undead Adventurer, Episode 10. What all happened in this episode? A lot of, I think, feel-good stuff, but there had to have been more to it than just that. I'm trying to remember... Oh, yeah, I guess it ended with, something that doesn't really feel like it's leading up to a crescendo, I guess. I think that's the word I'm just going to start using for describing these core/season finales. It's an interesting thing that it ended in, but I guess be a curiosity to see where it goes from there. There could be a big reveal. It's hard to say. Free Rend. Episode... Free Rend. Not Free Rend. Free Rend. Episode 26. Let's see. I'm just trying to remember that I'm remembering, because I think I already thought of some of the stuff I would say about it, or might say about it. I guess the previous episode not being what I thought it was when I saw it, but this one, doing a lot more engagements. I guess if there's any problem I have with it, it's that while Free Run does a lot of good slow burn stuff and a lot of interesting stuff about a lot of characters, it feels like it's doing it enough that, because it's been happening like every episode for a handful of different episodes now, maybe it feels like it's a little exhausting in that regard. I mean, at a minimum, good stuff keeps happening, but it does mean that the main thing we really, really wanted to see, and whether or not we need to see some of that other stuff, it's like, oh, did we need to see this flashback where that character explains another character? Because while that thing is important, it's not the thing we're necessarily most interested in. Which is not to say that that stuff wasn't cool, but it, felt like a bit of a distraction, which hasn't been a problem when it's happened here and there, but because the past handful of episodes have just done it so much, yeah. Feels a little exhausting. Like, especially this one, maybe some of it was a little repetitive feeling. Oh well. The Wrong Way to Use Healing Magic, episode 10. Definitely building up to big crescendo. And actually decent enough stuff, with my main qualm being that they've introduced a character who's like, humans are so weak, but it's not necessarily clear that his advantage over everybody else is that humans are so weak versus, oh, yeah, you just happen to find some good equipment. In which case, he just kind of sounds like a baby. It's like, why isn't he saying, it's too bad y'all are ill-equipped? It's like, you are ill-equipped. You don't have the equipment. Stuff like that. Well, anyways, it feels like it's that, but it might not be that. It's really hard to tell. But at least it's doing a decent job of setting up a notable and important crescendo, I think. The Weakest Tamer began a journey, episode 9. I guess it's kind of interesting that it feels like instead of the character kind of being on a journey for this show, these last handful of episodes do feel like, well, here's important events happening right here and now. And they're decent. Actually, I would say they're good. I guess I would just worry about, okay, well, does it feel like it detracts from where it felt like the show was going? And I think for some people it might. I think for me it's still mostly okay. That feeling like this is a show about, this young girl who's a person out of place trying to find her place in the world. And it feels like more and more elements of that, continue to happen. But maybe that's just me. Solo Leveling, episode 9. I think this was a pretty entertaining episode. What would I say is specifically entertaining about it? I wouldn't say that this felt like it was a dragging on episode like maybe some of the others are. This one episode was just entertaining enough to watch on its own. That's like, yeah, that's fine. Neat stuff happens, neat stuff happens, neat stuff happens. Maybe some sadness at some of the unfortunateness, maybe some of the hope at some of the stuff it's set up. But overall, I think it worked out pretty nice for an episode. Strongest Tank, episode 10. I think this was actually a pretty satisfying episode, finally. Like, the other episodes haven't quite felt there. They've been nice in that they kind of deal with this premise as a main story, but they weren't really dealing with, I guess, the fundamental additional thoughts that seem to be a bit of a driver. So, like, if Strongest Tank is kind of a, okay, now we need to see the Strongest Tank and him doing raids and stuff, but that's kind of a satisfaction of the title that sold us on it, whereas the premise setup began with an interesting mystery and just seemed to be ignoring it until this episode where, okay, that seems relevant again. And I can see why it's structured this way. It's because they, a lot of the information that's been revealed over these past couple of episodes especially are important build up to us understanding where they were going with this stuff. And I guess you could say that's a flaw with the show where, okay, yeah, that's a good point. It just didn't feel that way initially. Might mean it's a show that's better on rewatch, maybe. But, interesting stuff. Tales of Wedding Rings, episode 10. I did not see this episode going the way it did, and I have to say I approve of some of what it's doing, and I actually have some interesting thoughts about what it may be trying to do. It, like I said before, it seemed like it would be 2 episodes per ring and then 2 episodes for the Abyss King, but it definitely seems to be throwing that a little bit out of whack. And I'm interested to see what it's going to do from there. It's just been a pretty respectable series. Just also happens to have boobies in it, but I think even if it didn't have the boobies, it would still be a decent show, I would say. Probably doesn't need them to catch people, but it probably catches more people by doing that. So, I'm not going to complain about it too much. They are really nicely drawn. But I'm appreciating the fact that I can just fire up the story and just find the story engaging. Especially since, the thing that would make it really good is if that fucking Kingdom of Elves just kind of got nuked. Just save the 1 or 2 good elves from it, but everybody else just gets obliterated. Then, it'd be a perfect show, I guess. But I've complained about that one enough. Fluffy Paradise, episode 11. The important crescendo-y stuff is happening right now, and I do appreciate the fact that it is... Like, it's the kind of show that you would almost expect not to see death in, I suppose, for lack of better words. And it still seems to be careful and controlled about it, but it's still... It's not sitting on its laurels and saying, no, I don't need to do that. It's at least doing that stuff because for all of its innocent animation and fundamental premise, it's still trying to do some, important stuff in its own world. So... decent episode 11, I would think. Banished from the Heroes Party, episode 10. I like how this episode is setting up a thing where our main character, who's... what do they call them? Who's... class. They didn't call it a class. They call it something else in the show, and I'm blanking on it. His calling, his whatever they call it, his blessing. I think they called him blessing. His blessing is something that's kind of naturally okay. You should be listening to him because you're the hero, but he's the hero's guide. That's his blessing. And I do like the fact that he seems conflicted now because he realizes, based on the very things he's said, he should be doing that. And so he's conflicted, and I kind of hate that fairy, but not too much, but I'm appreciating the fact that that conflict exists in its form because it means that the easy way out isn't an easy way out. And I guess all I'm waiting to see is how it ends, because it definitely feels like there's some good drama going on, and I'm curious to see how it pops. 7th Time Loop, episode 10. if that is the setup for the final conclusion, it'd be interesting. I mean, I have my thoughts on it, but I don't want to think about it because it may be a spoiler for this, and, well, I don't want to think about it out loud, I mean, for y'all. But, you know, it's interesting enough. If there's any weakness so far, it's that this episode feels like the one that's least built upon our main characters having these previous lives. Like, all the pieces have been set up in this episode, but if it's setting up for a good crescendo, then it's going to bring us interesting things from those. And here's hoping it does have them, because if it doesn't, then it basically means that it used up a lot of its coolest stuff in the first half of the series, I think. So, hoping for the best. We'll just have to see what happens. Tsukimichi Moonlit Fantasy, Season 2, Episode 10. And I don't think we have to worry about this one building up to a crescendo because this is a 2-core. And they might do a core crescendo, but I guess we'll just have to see what it chooses to do. But I don't think it needs to set that up. It doesn't seem to be setting that up. It's just set up, okay, interesting things happen. I'm trying to think if maybe there's a little bit of a crescendo they're setting up with that one character. Something's going to have to happen, and something big's going to have to happen because of it. And I'm wondering if, like, maybe they chose that as a crescendo point, and maybe that's caused some of the timing to feel weird in the second season. Not necessarily bad, but sometimes it feels a little quick, but sometimes it feels maybe a little slow. But just a little bit, not enough to say that there's anything objectively wrong. But otherwise, amusing, entertaining stuff keeps happening, and but a lot of it happened in this episode, so, you know, excuse me, Jesus. Entertaining stuff. And then finally, 'tis time for Torture Princess, episode 10, and as usual, you know, the show just keeps being a kind of funny, neat, heartwarming thing to have. I think the last episode was probably the most heartwarming of them, but this one still had some really great stuff in it. Like, they don't keep doing the same thing, and they just keep just enough variety that it's actually a fun show. I don't think it'll be fun to binge watch. It's probably something that's just more fun. Yes, here's this show I watch every Monday, and that was kind of a nice episode to watch. A lot of nice things about it. I still appreciate the series quite a bit. So, outside of that, what else is there to talk about? Dead by Daylight, I'm prepared for the new chapter coming out tomorrow. That would, I forgot the name of the chapter. I know it comes with the new survivor, Sable Ward. You know, a lot of people looking forward to her because she's a cute goth girl. And I think they've had other girls who could wear goth outfits, but she's goth from the get-go. Not to be confused with Michaela, who's, I'm not sure if Wiccan is the right word, but she definitely has that kind of witchy feel, which is not quite gothy, I think. So, it's good. There's not overlap. Probably Sable's going to have some really great cosmetics in the future. She may even have some great ones on launch. I guess we'll have to see. And then The Unknown, which I'm definitely curious to see what they'll do with cosmetic-wise, because, you know, he's kind of got an infectious smile. He's kind of got... It's creepy, but at the same time, when you're like, oh, that's creepy. But now that we got that out of the way, it's kind of fun. I wonder if a meme way to play him would just be to kind of wander up to survivors, maybe successfully corner them. That's kind of hard to do. Survivors have to corner themselves. But then you just go up to them and smile and then run away. I don't know. It's funny in the head. It's probably not going to be as funny in-game. But, I don't know. His power will be really weird. We'll have to see. I don't remember what his perks even are. Sable's perks, they're not great, but two of them could be usable. And one of them, it just sounds like a trap, but this is a funny sounding trap. I'm sure I'll be using that perk at some point because there's no way they're not going to release a Sable War tome where you have to use her invocation successfully. So I'll definitely use it when that time comes. For everything else, I don't know. I have my basic information set, so we'll just have to see. I suppose there's that interesting approach to it. So there's a challenge to unhook yourself in public matches, and with her basement one, you should be able to go down to the basement, get the killer to down you, let them hook you down there, and you should be able to successfully use it at least once a match, which makes it more reliable than Deliverance, where you would have to unhook somebody first, and of course Deliverance is cursed, and usually if you're running it, you're the first person found, and yada yada yada. But yeah, you know, there's that. I don't know. Maybe I'll do that, maybe I won't. We'll have to see. Outside of that, outside of that, what other video game stuff? So, one interesting project I tried to do over the weekend was, I'm like, oh, you know, I've got all these Super Smash Brothers Ultimate Wii Fighter costumes. I should make a lot of them. You know, like, I had the Barrett, Tifa, and Aerith ones, so I'm like, I should make those characters and do that. And then I realized while working on it, when I'm like, okay, I had made those, made some others. There were some other candidates. I'm like, I want to make this, but oh wait, I only have one of the pieces. Did I not go through the game and collect all the stuff? So that's why I'm firing up the game and purchasing stuff in the shop, because I have 250,000 gold coins, so I can just spend, and hopefully get all the gear for the Mii's unlocked. I guess after that, I would just need to go through the list again and see if there was any that would be unlocked in challenges, because I think I'll have them all if I do that. If I finish this purchasing spree. But I guess we'll have to see. While I'm at it, I'm purchasing all the music, but yeah, you know, it's entertaining. It's just kind of funny that I'm doing that now, all these years later. But, you know, I feel like there needs to be all the Mii fighters that there could be. Other people want to create their own special Mii fighters, you know, that's something they'll be able to do on top of the ones that I made, but need a lot of these costumes to just be playable. So I'm spending the time to do that, but I've obviously stopped and taking a break while I purchase all these things and figure out what I need to make. I think I realized it when I'm like, okay, Springman, I need to make Springman. Wait, does he not have a headpiece? Oh, I just never unlocked the headpiece. Apparently I never got Ribbon Girl either, top or bottom. So, you know, I'm needing to work on all that stuff. But, you know, beyond that, I'm just doing Smash Bros. On the side and then waiting for the next Dead by Daylight chapter to release. And then we'll see what kind of playing I choose to do. Yeah, can't think of anything else. Yeah, I hope y'all had a good Sunday. That was not only the day that Daylight Savings starts for everybody here in the U.S. that still follows that practice for some reason. You know, if you're not there, I think that's kind of fortunate. But the unfortunate thing is it was Mario Day, you know, March 10th, M-A-R-1-0. Mario. But I didn't do anything Mario specific on that day. But hopefully y'all thought of Mario. Alright, let's wrap things up there. Y'all, have a nice week.